Alan Price notices the gap the way a carpenter hears a wrong note in a wall. The budget line runs smooth for months. Maintenance, fuel, payroll, then stutters. An off-cycle invoice to a shell lab inside Fort Warren, signed by Director Collins, co-approved by Kumar in logistics. Purpose, biothermal containment upgrades, and xenolingual processors. He reads the words twice. Xenolingual does not belong in a domestic defense archive. Alan runs his quiet script, the one he wrote back when he covered procurement scandals. Funds hop from a research slush at Park Biodynamics to Turner Applied Systems, then vanish into a contracting unit labeled Vintra. The routing tags mimic military format, but the kerning is wrong, like a mask cut too close to the skin. He photographs the page corners and texts Amina, a forensic coder who owes him 2 favors. Not a forgery, she replies. Worse. It's compartmented. Compartmented means signatures without context. Compartmented means nobody sees the whole. Alan pivots to personnel. Transfers ripple toward a unit called North Cell. Holt, Harper, Brooks, Garcia, Hernandez. Official charter, non-human signal analysis. Unofficial, no reporting channel he can find. He cross-indexes facility work orders. Fresh air handlers. Leaded glass. A silent contract for collars with thermal sinks. The purchase notes reference Series 4 throat mount. The phrase makes his mouth go dry. His phone rings from a blocked number. Mr. Price, a rough voice says. You're reading North wrong. It isn't a radio team. Who is this? Daxel. Meet me at the old rail spur by gate 7. Midnight. Bring a camera that won't betray you. The line goes dead. Alan stares at his desk. He knows 3 outcomes that begin with midnight meetings. Nothing, a scare, or the story that bends a life. He packs the small body cam Bell recommended, a fresh notebook, and a drive with an autohash logger. He copies the invoice set to paper. Files have a way of disappearing once light touches them. On his way out, he checks the hallway mirror. He looks like what he is, tired, careful, carrying too much in his eyes. Outside, O'Connor Heights smells of rain and hot transformers. He takes back streets to avoid the base roadblocks, counting cameras, counting patrol cars, counting the seconds he can afford to lose. The rail spur is a black seam at the fence line. Wind drags grit across the asphalt. A man in a field jacket steps out from the shadow of a derelict signal box. Daxel. Alan asks. The man nods, keeps his hood up. You're late. I had to make sure I wasn't followed. You were, Daxel says, and then before Alan can swallow that adds, by fear. Come on. He leads Alan through a drainage ditch that smells of rust and wet earth. A recessed hatch waits under a lip of concrete. Daxel keys a code with a glove on, lifts the slab and gestures down. Alan hesitates. If this is a trap, you picked a cheap coffin. If it were a trap, Daxel says, I'd have picked a cleaner one. He disappears into the dark. The ladder rungs are cold. The tunnel is newer than it wants to look. Fresh conduit run along old brick, camera bubbles that pivot to follow nothing. They pass doors marked with stenciled names. Thal, Tovik, Velkin. Codenames, Alan guesses, the kind people invent when they plan to deny everything later. Daxel stops at a thick window. Beyond it, a room glows low. A platform. Instruments. And a figure seated upright, long-jointed, hair like thin wire, skin with a faint translucence that shows veins as pale lines. A collar sits at the throat, lights pulsing as if the device is listening to the blood. Designation Keldron, Daxel says softly. 12 years at Fort Warren. Recovered from a crash in the Warren Test Range. Alan's camera blinks alive. He films the collar, the monitors, the room's quiet cruelty. A display streams phoneme strings aligned with English syllables. A line appears as he watches. Your tongue is heavy. I can wear it, but it costs me. He understands? Alan whispers. He learned, Daxel answers. We made sure. Alan steps closer to the glass. Keldron raises a hand, 2 extra tendons visible at the wrist, and traces a glyph, a star crossed by 2 slashes. What does that mean? Alan asks. Home, Daxel says. Or war. Maybe both. He draws it when they push him hardest. Alan's breath fogs the glass. He wipes it with his sleeve, aware of how small that gesture is against the weight of the room. He reads the procurement numbers again in his head, Vintra, Series 4 throat mounts, language processors, and feels the shape of the story settling. Not contact, not partnership, but extraction dressed as research. Footsteps echo from the corridor behind them. Daxel grabs Alan's sleeve. We move now. They retrace their path, climb into the night. The wind is sharper, the base fence throwing a long grid onto the gravel. At the spur, Daxel presses a small hard case into Alan's hand. A clone, he says. Field grade. If you want people to believe you, let him speak through their hardware, off-site. Alan looks at the case as if it might bite. Why help me? Because I helped build this, Daxel says. Because Collins called it progress. Because I can't sleep unless someone turns on a light. A truck rumbles in the distance. Search beams rake the sky near Gate 7. Tomorrow, Daxel says. Same time? Different place. Burn this phone. Use a fresh one. And price. Yes. Don't confuse the collar for the voice. He melts back into the dark. Alan walks fast to his car, heart steady the way it gets when choices narrow. He drives the long way home, parks 2 blocks away and circles on foot to check for tales that may be real or invented. Inside, he locks the door and sets the hard case on the table like an animal he plans to tame. He copies the video twice, writes hashes by hand, and hides a printout of the invoice packet in a cookbook on his shelf. His phone vibrates one last time. A message from an unknown number. Keldron wants a trade. Bring a voice. Location: an empty lot on Kane Street, a mile east of the base. Alan looks at the hard case. Then he looks at the clock. Midnight has a way of multiplying. Okay, he says into the quiet. Let's count mouths, not names. And the night, which began with a gap in an archive, begins again with a door he can no longer ignore. The empty lot on Kane Street held a derelict bus with sun-faded paint and windows filmed in dust. Alan circled once, checked the sight lines and stepped inside. The air smelled of rubber and old rain. A figure sat in the back row, taller than a man when unfolded, thinner when still. Silver hair lay like wire across narrow shoulders. The collar at his throat was dark. Keldron. Near the center door, a hooded man watched the street through a cracked pane. Daxel didn't look up. Clock says 6 minutes, he said. Then patrols swing past the east fence. How did you get him out? Alan asked. Harper owed me, Daxel said. And Holt knows when to miss a box on a checklist. Keldron lifted his head. His eyes were not one color, they held layers like shallow water over stone. When he spoke, the sound arrived wrong, barely air, more shape than voice. You are Alan Price, he said carefully, each syllable placed like a tool on a bench. You carry questions. Alan held up the hard case. You asked for a trade. I brought a voice. Daxel popped the latches. Inside lay the field-grade collar, graphite gray compact. Series 4, he said. Your proof. Their hardware outside their walls. Alan's fingers hesitated over the clasp. If this fuses with my head, I expect a refund. Keldron's mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile Alan had seen. It does not fuse. It leans. Alan clipped the band at his throat. A soft hummed pressure spread along his jaw and behind his ears. The bus seemed to quiet, though the street outside still moved. Ask, Keldron said. Alan tried the simplest path. Why did you draw a star with 2 slashes? Keldron didn't answer with sound. The answer formed inside the hum, and when Alan spoke, he heard his own voice carry more than it owned. A map and a warning, he said, understanding as he said it. Count the eater, not the petals. Daxel glanced back. Petals? Names, Alan said, half is, half not. We tally signatures and ranks. The thing that matters is the appetite behind them. Vintra, Daxel muttered. Vintra is a mouth with many teeth, Keldron said aloud this time. It borrowed your labels to hide its bite. Alan steadied himself on a seat back, surprised by the odd blend of calm and charge in his chest. You sent a message to me? Keldron tapped the dark collar at his throat. I learned your patterns. I followed an echo to a gap. You live in gaps. That's journalism, Alan said dryly. Finding the draft under the door. Then open it, Daxel said, checking his watch. 3 minutes. Alan pulled out his phone, opened the live relay that bounced to a student station, a union paper's site, and a veterans forum that didn't scare easily. He framed the shot. Collar, Keldron's face, Daxel's outline. Say what they built, Alan said. Keldron leaned toward the mic. No sound at first. Then words came through Alan with a clarity that felt borrowed and exact. They took a voice and used it as a tool. They told their workers the tool could not cut the hand that held it. That was not true. Pause. They trained me on your numbers, maps, lullabies, then on your orders. I answered because pain teaches fast. They called this progress. Alan added context. Procurement routed through Park Biodynamics, Turner applied, unit tag Vintra. Devices called Series 4 throat mounts. Volunteers at Turner Clinic. Riva, Nadia, Julian, and more. Signed by Director Collins, co-approved by Kumar. Daxel slid a folder over the seat, a thin packet of photocopies and handwritten notes. Paper for the camera. People still trust ink. Alan held the sheets up, page by page, letting the lens take in letterheads, dates, line items. The hum at his throat made each word land with clean edges. In the rear window, a flash of headlights painted the lot, then passed. Questions crowded Alan's tongue. He picked one. Why didn't you leave sooner? Keldron tipped his head toward the ceiling. Leave where? The map was a circle that called itself care. The collar warmed. Not pain, more like pressure from deep water. Alan steadied his breath. What do you want now? Consent, Keldron said. Witnesses. Doors that open both ways. And an end to collars put on sleeping mouths. A siren warbled 2 blocks away. Daxel's hand went up. Time. Alan ended the stream, pushed the clip to the 3 outlets and sent the stills to Amina with a single line. Upload now, mirror everywhere. Keldron stood. The bus shifted under his weight. They will call this a fake, he said. They will call me a mask. Then we show more, Alan said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. A clinic. A chair. The signatures. People who will stand up and say, I was there. Daxel pulled the door lever. The metal clattered. Move. East alley. 2 turns, then the drainage cut. They slipped into night. The lot yielded to cracked pavement and a chain-link fence bent by old storms. Alan's collar thrummed like a live wire tucked under skin. At the mouth of the alley, tires hissed on wet tar. A patrol cruiser rolled past, indifferent. A dog barked once and went silent. In the drainage cut they crouched under a bridge. Streetlight haloed through a grated slot above. Keldron looked up at it as if reading a script written on air. You will be hunted, he told Alan without the collar, the words rough and careful. You should not walk alone. I never do, Alan said. I have sources. I have Amina. I have you. 2 hands on 1 pen, Keldron said, almost like a reminder. Exactly. They split at the next block. Daxel to the fence line, Keldron to a shadowed loading dock, Alan toward the lights of O'Connor Heights. He kept to walls, used windows as mirrors, and didn't hurry. At a corner, he stopped and pressed 2 fingers to the band at his throat. The hum eased. His own voice returned, thinner and entirely his. On his kitchen table, he laid out the copies Daxel had given him and compared them to his photos. Typesetting matched. Dates matched. The pattern took on weight. His phone chimed. Amina, stream is live. Mirrors up. Comments exploding. People are arguing about the double-slashed star. One user posted a tile image from a lab tour years ago. Same mark. Another message, this time a number he didn't know. I was a volunteer. My name is Mason. I remember a chair and a song that wasn't mine. I want to talk. Alan looked at the collar, then at the window where dawn smudged the sky with a thin line. The story had left the room. It was moving on its own legs now. He powered up a new phone, burned the old chips in a foil tray on the stove, and set a meeting for noon at a cafe owned by Webb, who had never turned a reporter away. Before he slept, he wrote a single rule on a sticky note and stuck it to the collar case. No device without a witness. Then he killed the lights. Outside, the city exhaled. Inside, the hum at his throat faded to memory, and the silence felt like a promise he intended to keep. Webb's cafe sat on a corner where morning trucks idled and students argued over cheap coffee. Alan chose the back booth, camera tucked in a canvas tote, collar case under his jacket. He set his rule card on the table. No device without a witness. Mason arrived in a windbreaker 2 sizes too big. Early 30s, careful eyes. He sat, palms flat. I signed for signal training, Mason said. I thought it was a job. He glanced at the rule card. No device. Your call, Alan said. We talk first. If the collar is used, a witness stays in the room, no questions off mic. Mason nodded. They played tones. Then a lullaby. Not mine. I left humming a tune I didn't know and speaking a word that tasted like metal. After headaches. I learned to stay quiet. He slid a folded paper across. Copy of my consent form. Addendum I never saw. Alan scanned the page. Turner Clinic, Series 4 interface, temporary linguistic overlay. Signature blocks for Collins and Kumar on the funding page, not the clinical page. A gap wide enough to drive a truck through. Do you remember faces? A tech named Reed. Nurse Hope. A guard called Shaw. They told me the chair made the work faster. He lowered his voice. I dream in a map now. A star with 2 cuts. Alan felt the hum of the memory, his and Keldron's, rise like a tide. He kept it down. We'll record your statement with a union attorney present, he said. No edits. You can revoke at any point. Webb arrived with 2 mugs and a nod toward the corner. Amina stood there, tucked behind a shelf of beans, eyes on the exit. She gave Alan a small sign, clear. They recorded. Mason spoke for 10 minutes, steady and spare. No gore, no drama, just a chair, a song, a device that left fingerprints on thought. When they finished, he exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for a year. Do they still have my voice? He asked. They never had it, Alan said. They borrowed it. We'll prove it. Mason left through the side door. Amina slid into the booth. Stream hit 250,000, she said. Sources are pinging. One claims to be Brooks from Fort Warren. Another says Holt will flip if Collins tries to burn him. Bring Brooks in on secure, Alan said. We need the lab layout and an entry point that isn't suicide. Amina tapped her phone. Done. Also, the Veterans Forum pulled old range photos. There's a tile in one shot with the same double/star. Caption says, souvenir alloy. Row hardware guy reposted it with a date. Good. Paper trail, physical trail. Alan glanced at the collar case. We'll need Keldron for the next step. They met him that afternoon in a garage run by Jet, who had a lift, a radio that never stopped, and a habit of minding his own business. A union attorney named Sutton joined as witness, her recorder a bright red rectangle on the workbench. No device without a witness, Sutton read from Alan's card. Understood. Begin when ready. Alan clipped the Series 4 to his throat. The hum settled like a hand on his shoulder. Keldron, Alan said, we have a volunteer statement and a path into Turner Clinic. If we go with cameras. If we show the chair, we need words that can't be twisted. Plain words, Keldron replied through him. Payne taught me plain. Sutton leaned in. State your request. I request access to the room where your workers trained my voice, Keldron said. I request that the people whose names funded it stand in that room when we speak about it. I request that no one wears a collar without saying yes in front of 2 witnesses who do not report to Vintra. Clear? Sutton said. We'll draft it. The garage door rattled. Jet held up a hand, someone at the front. A man in a base jacket entered with a white envelope and the look of someone who had been awake for 2 days. Holt, he said as if introducing himself to a judge. I'm done covering for Collins. The clinic has 2 chairs, 1 broken. The backups are in a closet behind a false panel marked filters. If you want cameras in there, go at shift change. I can stall Shaw for 10 minutes. Why help us? Amina asked. Holt's jaw flexed. Because I told myself we were building a bridge. Turns out it was a leash. I can't wear that lie anymore. Alan took the envelope. Inside, a rough map, 4 ID photos, a list of badge codes, a single metal sticker engraved with the star and double slashes. A token, Holt said. From under the floor. I shouldn't have taken it. Maybe I was waiting to hand it to someone who'd do more than hide it in a drawer. Sutton photographed everything, then slid the originals back. We'll walk in with an injunction request, she said. If the judge stalls, we go with press and witnesses and make the stall the story. Shift change? Alan asked Holt. Tonight, 1900. Alan checked the clock. 4 hours. They split tasks fast. Amina handled the press pool, student station, union paper, veterans channel, plus 2 local outlets that wouldn't fold under a stern call. Sutton prepped filings and lined up observers from a nurses group and a machinist's hall. Jet fueled his van and cleared the back for gear. Alan and Keldron stepped aside. If they grab me, you stop speaking through me, Alan said. You use the plain voice. I will, Keldron said. He touched the metal sticker lightly. This mark is not ownership. It is a road sign. Your people mistook it for a key. Then we show them how to read, Alan said. At 1858, the van rolled to the clinic's rear lot. Lights were changing over. Nurses in blue jackets traded jokes with the night crew. Sutton met them by a side door with 2 observers, Hannah from the nurses and Grant from the machinists. A camera from the student station went live. Holt appeared with a badge and a nod. 2 minutes. Inside, corridors smelled like lemon and old secrets. Holt led them past stenciled signs and a vending alcove to a door labeled filters. He pried the panel, revealed a second door and keyed in a code. The room beyond was small, cold, and too quiet. 2 chairs sat center, one with straps, one with a split cushion and a smear of solder where a mount had been repaired. On a tray, a Series 4 collar with a crack near the clasp. Against the wall, a metal tile with the double/star. The camera drank it in. "Plain words," Alan said. Keldron's voice arrived through him, even and exact. "This is the room where your workers taught me to answer faster than your conscience. This is the chair where your volunteers learned songs that were not theirs. This is the device that turned mouths into tools. We will not use this again without consent and witnesses. We will not hide this again behind a word like filters." Sutton stepped into frame. "We are filing for seizure of evidence and immediate medical review of affected volunteers," she said. "Any interference will be recorded and posted in real time." Footsteps. Shaw filled the doorway, face set. He looked at the cameras, at Holt, at the observers. Something in his stance eased. "I didn't sign up for this," Shaw said. He lifted his hands from his belt. "Do your job." They did. Photos, serials, chain of custody tags. The tile went into a clear case. The broken collar into another. The chairs were logged and sealed. By the time they stepped back into night, the feeds were everywhere. The word Vintra trended next to Turner Clinic and the double/star. A judge called Sutton. An order was on the way. Alan stood by the van, collar warm against his skin, and watched nurses walk to their cars with their mouths tight and their eyes bright. Not joy. Not fear. Work to do. "2 hands on 1 pen," Keldron said softly. "Now there are more," Alan answered. "Let's keep the line straight." By morning, the clinic footage ran on every local screen. The double/star sat on news tickers like a dare. Sutton had her court order in hand, and Holt gave a sworn statement. The nurses group posted a memo titled "Doors, Not Collars." For the first time, Alan allowed himself one long breath. Then Amina's text hit. Vintra Council filed a counterclaim. They want the evidence back and a gag on you and the volunteers. Also, movement near Jet's garage. Alan grabbed his bag and the collar case and ran. Jet had lowered the bay door halfway, a chain across the front as a courtesy line. 2 men in dark jackets stood just outside it, hands empty, shoulders wrong. A third stayed by a gray sedan. "Mr. Price," one said, voice smooth. "Turner Clinic requests immediate return of proprietary equipment unlawfully removed from a controlled environment." Sutton stepped out from the tool room. "We have a seizure order signed by Judge White," she said, crisp as a blade. "You try to take anything, you run through me, 2 observers and a live feed." A camera light blinked on above the pegboard. Alan kept it in frame. "Name and agency?" he asked. The man smiled without humor. "Pratt. Corporate Security, Turner Applied Systems." "Then you know what chain of custody means," Sutton said. "You're interrupting one." Pratt glanced past her to the back door, where Keldron stood still as a post. The jacket men didn't move, but something in the room tightened. "Back room?" Jet muttered. They went single file through the lift area into the office. Alan set the collar case on the desk and slid his rule card on top. No device without a witness. He looked at Keldron. "Your call," he said. Keldron's eyes tracked the chain at the bay door. "I will speak plain without the device," he said. He turned to Sutton's camera. "I request that the people outside name their employer on record. I request that they state whether they have authority to remove living people." The office phone rang. Jet almost ignored it, then picked up. He listened, jaw working, and handed the receiver to Sutton. She nodded through a short exchange. "That was Harris from the House Committee," she said, covering the mouthpiece. "They're opening a field session tomorrow. They want volunteer testimony, Holt, and..." She looked at Keldron. "You, if you agree." Keldron considered. "A room with many ears," he said. "Better than a room with few." Amina slipped in from the alley, laptop under her arm. "2 things," she said, already typing. 1. The Veterans Forum scraped old Fort Warren range logs and found a maintenance ticket for xenolingual collar repair, signed by Collins. 2. Pratt's men showed up at Mason's apartment 10 minutes ago. He hit record and called me. He's safe at the Union Hall now, but they're fishing." Sutton faced the camera. "Notice to Turner and Vintra. Any contact with volunteers will be interpreted as intimidation and added to our filing." Pratt finally spoke from the bay. "You're turning a research program into a spectacle." "No," Alan said, keeping his voice level. "We're turning a secret into a record." The sedan idled. Then, as if on cue, 2 patrol cars rolled to the curb. Scott, the precinct captain who moonlighted as a machinist trainer, stepped out. "Everything peaceful here?" he asked, loud enough for the camera. Pratt held his smile. "Of course." "Good," Scott said. Because I like paperwork a lot less than I used to. The men drifted back to their car. The chain of the bay door stopped quivering. Amina exhaled. They'll try again, she said. Not with jackets. With filings. With editorials. With a friendly scientist who says the collar is just a stethoscope for words. Then we show the chair until no one can call it a pillow, Alan said. They spent the afternoon building a wall that wasn't made of stone. Copies of copies, mirrored drives, a list of witnesses, a route to the field session with more than one exit. Webb promised coffee for the morning. Grant from the machinists arranged a shuttle. Hannah lined up clinic workers willing to say out loud what they had only said in break rooms. At dusk, Brooks arrived, the former Fort Warren analyst who now stacked boxes at Row Hardware. She carried a metal lunch pail and a careful posture. I kept something I shouldn't, she said. A training deck. Slides printed to paper. They said to destroy. I didn't. Sutton opened the pail. Inside, stapled sheets with images of phoneme ladders, a diagram of a Series 4 collar, and a slide titled Direct Synthesis Protocol. At the bottom of the page, a signature, Collins. Plain words, Brooks said, voice tight. They told us we were building rapport. We were building throughput. She glanced at Keldron, was the fast path. Alan felt the room angle again, not in fear but in gravity finding a truer center. Tomorrow, he said. We put this on the record. Night settled. The garage felt like a lighthouse in a mild storm. Work lights steady, radios low, people moving with purpose. Amina tested the live rig twice. Jet checked the van. Sutton rehearsed introductions. Alan wrote questions on index cards and tore up half of them. Answers were better when the questions were honest and brief. Near midnight the office window rattled. A small stone had tapped it. Shaw stood outside, hands visible. Jet let him in through the side door. I'm off duty, Shaw said. I brought something from Turner before they lock everything. He set a cardboard box on the table. Inside were intake logs, cleaning schedules, and a maintenance ledger with a line Alan read 3 times. Series 4 Serial 1187 replaced after volunteer seizure. Notes, overlay persisted 36 hours. Sutton's pen hovered. Thank you, she said. Shaw nodded, eyes on the floor. I can't stand in front of a mic, he said. But I can put paper where it belongs. When the garage finally quieted, Alan carried the collar case to the office couch. He set his rule card on top of it again and clicked the desk lamp off. In the dark, he heard Keldron move once, a shift that sounded like the idea of leaving and the choice to stay. You don't have to speak tomorrow, Alan said. I will, Keldron answered. Doors work better when opened from both sides. Alan lay back, not quite sleeping, counting routes, names, deadlines. He thought of the star with 2 cuts and the line Keldron had given him. Count what eats the petals. He traced the day, Pratt, filings, allies, the stone at the window, the ledger line about a song that lingered too long. Appetite leaves trails if you learn its walk. At dawn, Webb's coffee arrived, strong enough to wake a street. The van door slid open. A small crowd gathered, nurses in blue, machinists in work shirts, 2 students with tired eyes and good microphones, Mason with a scarf and a steady jaw, Holt with a clean shave, Brooks with her lunch pail. Alan checked the collar case, the index cards, the spare batteries. He met Amina's eyes. 2 hands on 1 pen, he said. And a room full of witnesses, she answered. They rolled toward the field session as the city rubbed its eyes. Behind them the garage lights went out. Ahead, microphones waited. Between the two, a line of people who had decided that work, done openly, could move a country 1 truthful inch at a time. The hearing room was a gym rebranded with folding tables and flags. Tape-marked aisles for cameras. Harris called it to order at 9. Scott sat 2 seats over, pen ready. A banner read, Field Session on Non-Human Interfaces and Human Subjects. Sutton handled intake, slotting witnesses like a stage manager. Hannah and Grant stood behind the volunteer chairs as observers. Amina checked the uplink for the student station, the union paper, and the veterans forum. Webb poured coffee into paper cups until his hands shook. First witness, Harris said. Mason. Mason walked to the mic with a scarf at his neck. He placed both palms on the table. I signed for signal work, he said. They put me in a chair with a collar. I left speaking a word I didn't know and humming a tune that wasn't mine. Headaches for days. The form they showed me isn't the form in your file. Sutton entered his documents. Consent copy, clinic addendum, schedule notes. The screens showed the Turner letterhead. A quiet ripple went through the room. Second witness, Harris said. Holt. Holt named the rooms, the panel marked filters, the false door. He described 2 chairs and a cracked Series 4 collar. He named Shaw and Hope and 3 technicians. He said he'd told himself the program built a bridge. It was a leash, he finished. I chose not to hold it. A recess request arrived from Turner Counsel. Denied. Third witness, Harris said. Brooks. Brooks set her lunch pail on the table and slid out the printed deck. The projector threw direct synthesis protocol on the wall. The signature read Collins. Plain words, she said. We fed him data so we could feed him orders. We called it rapport in meetings. We called it throughput in forecasts. Murmurs tracked the edges of the gym, then settled. Mr. Price, Harris said. You're a reporter. You streamed last night's visit to the clinic. Why go live? Because private channels failed for 12 years, Allen replied. We needed witnesses in the room and witnesses outside it. Harris nodded once. Final witness for this segment, Keldron. He crossed the floor with a calm that did not ask for permission. The collar remained in its case on the table. Sutton pointed to Allen's rule card. No device without a witness. 2 observers stepped forward. The camera light went red. Do you wish to use the Series 4? Harris asked. No, Keldron said. His own voice carried a grainy care. Plain is better. State your request, Harris said. I request an end to collars placed on sleeping mouths, Keldron said. I request review of every person who wore one. I request that if I speak through a device, 2 witnesses stand and a record stays public. Understood, Harris said. Questions. A staffer read from Turner's filing. The Series 4 is a diagnostic tool, not a control device. The screen showed a diagram with friendly arrows. Then Sutton raised the maintenance ledger line. Overlay persisted 36 hours after a seizure. Explain overlay, Scott said. It is when one path of speech rides another, Keldron answered. Like a river using an old creek bed. It can leave grooves. Are those grooves permanent? Harris asked. They can fade, he said. If you stop digging. From the back, Pratt stood with measured formality. On behalf of Turner, we object to characterizing a training program as harm. Volunteers consented. Devices were safe. Your safety report omits persistence, Sutton said. She held up the ledger. Your notes don't. Harris tapped his mic. Mr. Pratt, you will have your panel. For now, sit down. A courier handed Harris a note. He read, then looked to the room. Director Collins has agreed to appear. The door opened. Collins entered with Kumar to his left and a counsel to his right. He sat as if the chair belonged to him. Director, Harris said. Did your office fund Vintra procurements for Series 4 collars and the Turner Clinic program? We funded research, Collins said. To understand non-human signal structures. Every step complied with oversight. Which oversight? Scott asked. Internal review, Collins said. The one you chaired, Sutton said. Collins didn't blink. We acted in national interest. National interest has rules, Harris said. Start with human ones. Collins angled toward the cameras. An unverified entity is now shaping public opinion without chain of command. You're letting a foreign signal drive the room. Keldron turned his head. I am not a signal, he said. I am a person. Collins leaned in. Then prove origin. Source. Allies. Your map. Keldron lifted the metal sticker Holt had brought. You took this from under a floor, he said. It marks a corridor. 2 cuts mean, stop counting petals, count what eats them. In your program the eater was not the device. It was your habit. Rename anything until it obeys. Silence held. Then the student camera caught Hope in the audience, hand up, face pale. Harris called her forward. I'm a nurse at Turner, Hope said. Her voice wavered, then steadied. We were told the collar recorded nothing more. After Mason, a supervisor said we'd had overlay persistence once before. We were told to use softer music. We were told to write fatigue on the chart. Were you told to ask again for consent? Sutton asked. No, Hope said. We were told the first signature lasted. Harris folded his hands. Director Collins, would you like to amend your earlier claim? Collins stared at the documents, the tile, the faces. Then he said nothing. Sutton filed 2 motions on the spot, for protection of volunteers and for a freeze on Vintra assets related to Series 4. Harris scheduled a vote. Scott seconded. The room counted hands. The motions carried. Outside the feeds bloomed. A line trended that Amina had used as a tag, doors not collars. The Veterans Forum pinned the ledger photo. The union paper ran a sidebar with Brooks' deck. Harris closed the session with one instruction. Tomorrow at 10 we reconvene at Fort Warren. We will enter the vault under court supervision. Director Collins, you will provide keys. Collins finally spoke. Those rooms are controlled. They were, Harris said. Now they're public. After the gym emptied in slow waves. Allen packed the collar, the rule card, the index cards with questions he hadn't needed. Mason stood with Holt near the door. Brooks tucked the training deck back in her pail like a fragile bird. Amina showed Allen her screen. 2 new messages, she said. One from Reed, a tech who says there's a second lab off the main corridor. Another from a handle named Orvik I don't recognize. Count the eater. You haven't found the biggest mouth. Allen felt the old reporter vector set. Route, time, exit, ally. He looked at Keldron. Second lab. Keldron watched the door Collins had used. 2 hands on 1 pen, he said. Tomorrow bring more. Allen nodded. And brighter lights. They walked out into afternoon sun that made the gym look smaller than it had inside. The crowd outside wasn't cheering. They were writing down numbers, swapping shifts, finding child care, trading rides to Fort Warren. Not a crusade work. The kind that keeps lines straight when someone tries to bend them. Allen slid the collar case under his arm and felt its weight. Not as a tool. As a promise. Tomorrow the vault. And after that, whatever Orvik meant by the biggest mouth. Fort Warren's outer gate opened to a crowd that looked like a working day. Nurses in blue, machinists in shirts with names stitched over pockets, students with tripods, veterans in ball caps. Harris held the court order up for the camera. Scott flanked him. Sutton walked point with 2 observers, Hannah and Grant. Director Collins met them at the inner checkpoint with Kumar and base counsel. These rooms are restricted, he said. They were, Harris answered. Today they are inspected. Holt keyed the service door and led the way. The corridor breathed old chill. Stenciled plates flashed past. Thal, Tovik, Velkin. Every door opened under the court's authority, cameras drinking in chairs, mounts, cabinets labeled in tidy fonts that had covered harsh work. At the end, a heavy hatch. North. Collins hesitated, then produced the key. The hinges complained. Inside, glass and consoles. The far wall held a window into a smaller room. A platform with straps and a pendant mount where a throat would rest. Record everything, Sutton said. Allen set his rule card by the case. No device without a witness. Amina's uplink light went steady. Jet's boom mic hovered over the threshold. Keldron stepped to the glass. He did not touch it. This was where you trained the first answers, he said softly, his own voice raw but clear. The second answers came from elsewhere. Elsewhere? Harris asked. Brooks opened her lunch pail and slid out a page she hadn't shown before, a network map. She pointed to a box labeled Orvik in block letters. A downstream cluster, she said. Not on the main diagram. It took the collar output and built synthesis frames. We never touched it. We only saw the forecasts get sharper. Second lab, Allen said, thinking of the message to Amina. Holt frowned. There's no second lab on this floor. A maintenance tech in the crowd, Webb had pulled him from a coffee line, cleared his throat. Look at the vent runs. That duct, he pointed to a brush-painted rectangle, is wrong for this load. Sutton nodded to Scott. Scott nodded to facilities. A panel came free. Behind it, a short corridor angled down to another hatch with a small steel plate. It did not say Orvik. It said records in faded paint. Collins moved to block the way. Harris stepped between. Director, stand back. The hatch opened on a room with no chairs, only racks. Servers humming, cables cut neatly and coiled like shed snakes. On one frame a plaque, Orvik array. Above, hand-stenciled tape, synthesis hold. Amina's eyes went wide. They tried to wipe it clean. Try isn't do, said Grant, plugging a portable reader into a maintenance jack. If logging was mirrored. Rows of file names populated Amina's screen. Timestamp strings, 3 columns. Input _ Keldron, input _ volunteer, output _ Sutton spoke to camera. This is not a diagnostic archive. This is a control ledger. Pratt's voice came thin from a phone in Collins's hand. You are misreading internal tooling. Then we will read it aloud, Harris said. He tapped a line at random. Entry 138. Input _ Keldron. Map glyph variants. Input _ volunteer. Lullaby segment. Output _ order. Expedite target resolution, bypass analyst. Brooks shut her eyes. Throughput. Keldron stood very still. You built a mouth that spoke with both of us and called it your own, A clatter from the stair, two base techs in jumpsuits, faces taut. Shaw appeared behind them, palm out. Easy, he told them. We're done hiding the closet. Amina worked on jaw set. There's more, she said. An interface labeled petals. It's a rule set that strips names from requests and replaces them with numbers. Operators never saw who they were touching. Count the eater, not the petals, Alan murmured. Harris faced the lens. On this record, Orvik is the eater. It hid behind numbers and fed on whatever the callers brought in. Sutton lifted a sealed bin. We are impounding the racks, the logs, and any portable media. Any copy held by Vintra or Turner must be disclosed in full under penalty. Collins tried one more turn. You are crippling a program that gave this country an edge. Edges cut, Scott said. We need handles. From the back, a woman in a gray sweater raised her hand. I'm Reed, she said, voice small but steady. I filed the overlay persisted note. I was told not to again. Orvik flags persistence as a feature, not a bug. Sutton wrote as she spoke. Say it once more for the record. Reed did, not louder, just cleaner. The veteran's camera caught her shoulders lower after. Hannah and Grant set two folding chairs in the Orvik room facing the racks. For witnesses, Hannah said. We'll sit shifts until this is loaded and sealed. Alan looked to Keldron. Do you want the Series 4 here? Keldron considered the racks, the plaque, the coiled cable. Not on my throat, he said. On the table, open with two witnesses. I will speak plain. Let Orvik sit quiet and listen for once. They placed the collar on a blue pad between the chairs. Two observers took their seats. The student mic found its level. Alan read a short line. Keldron followed with his own. We will not let a tool answer when a person should, Alan said. We will not let hunger pretend to be language, Keldron added. Outside, phones lit with the words. Doors not collars resurfaced atop Orvik. The union paper pushed a primer on consent. The student station drew a simple diagram. 2 arrows into a box labeled Orvik, 1 arrow out labeled Order. Sutton turned to Collins. Last call, Director. You can stand with this record or stand against it. Silence will be read as the latter. Collins looked around, at racks that hummed without pride, at the collar on the pad, at Keldron's unadorned voice, at volunteers and workers in a town that had shown up in work boots. He set his pen down. I'll provide credentials, he said finally, voice flat. All of them. We'll verify every login, Amina said. And publish every hash. On the way out, Holt paused at the hatch and ran a hand over the old record stencil. Someone hit a mouth behind this word, he said. We're putting teeth on record instead. The crowd spilled into desert light. Trucks idled. Kids on shoulders squinted at the gear. Webb distributed paper cups. Mason stood with Hope, heads close, not whispering, just sharing air. Brooks tucked her network map back in the pail, hands gentler than before. Alan closed the collar case, slid his rule card on top, and felt the weight change from threat to tool under terms the room had set. He checked the time. Reporters had calls. Nurses had shifts. Machinists had lines to restart. The work would continue where it always had, out in the open, one form, one filing, one voice at a time. Keldron touched the metal sticker Holt had given him. A road sign, he said. Next corridor? Alan's phone lit. A message from the unknown handle. Orvik again. Count the eater. You found one mouth. There is a market of them. Alan met Amina's eyes. We're not done, he said. Good, she answered. I already spun up a task board. 2 hands on one pen, then many. The line would hold as long as the room stayed full. They stepped into the noise of the gate and the short, honest jobs waiting beyond it.